All right. Welcome to this episode of Pint of Comics. We're going to do things a little differently. No intro music this week. And here's the reason why. So, on April 17th, a good friend of the Pint, Dino Gangali, who is a podcaster, did a show called Podcast. You probably have heard his promo. It's been played many times at the beginning of episodes of the Pint. Passed away. And it's funny. As I record this on April 29th, 2021, I'm reminded by Facebook that today is Dino's birthday as well. So it's a little bittersweet, obviously, that I have to say these things, but I think it's important that they get said. So a couple years ago, I had just somehow randomly heard a couple episodes of a podcast Dino did with a friend Andrew called What Podcast, and they did one all about Friday the 13th, and they did a Jaws one. I'm a huge Jaws fan, and I listened to both of them, and I enjoyed them, and I reached out to Dino, who I had never met before, and told him how much I liked them. And from that point forward, even though I never met the man in person, we were very friendly through social media, and it's one of those things where very close in age. I think he was a year older than me. Yeah, so I got the news on April 17th, through social media. I'm sorry, or the 18th, the day after he passed. And my mind was blown. Literally the week before, there was a post put up by his wife, Michelle, that he wasn't feeling well. And their episode, because they did the show together, was going to be late or not come out that week. And as we did occasionally, I messaged him and just said, "Hey, Dino, sorry to hear you're down," And he told me that he was having some back issues, and he couldn't sleep, and but he thanked me for checking in on him. And unfortunately, that was the last time I ever interacted with Dino. He was obviously taken way too soon. If you didn't know Dino, or at least deal with him in any way, shape, or form, one of the nicest guys on the planet. I was lucky enough, maybe a year and a half ago, a year ago, that he asked me to be on an episode of his the podcast, podcast, that he was doing, and we talked about Saturday morning rituals. We talked about cereal and cartoons and wrestling and all that stuff, and it was wonderful fun. And he was actually planned on being on Pint of Comics very soon. He had picked his movie. I won't tell you what it is, but Lloyd and I are going to do the episode in honor of Dino. And I just wanted to put this out there real quick and say I love you, Dino, and I can only wish the best for his family. And they're going to continue. His wife Michelle put out there that they have 3 kids as well, and Dino was very enthusiastic about podcasting. You could not hold him down. A very faith-based guy, and I guess in the end, his message that he always put out there in every episode of his podcast, in every social media post, was be decent to each other. He believed heavily in that, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that. So I don't know. I just figured let's just roll into this episode of Pint of Comics. You're not going to hear the theme song like you normally do. I'm just going to leave about maybe 15 or 20 seconds of silence, and maybe reflect on your loved ones. I'm not trying to make it too serious here, but it's one of those things. We love you, Dino, and we hope you're resting well, resting in power, and thank you. Thank you for being a friend. We are back with Pint O Comics. I am John. He is Lloyd. We are the Pint, and we are here tonight to do another one of our special comic book deep dives. Lloyd, what do we call the comic book deep dive episodes?
We call these the 100 Proof Book Project.
That's right. I can't
say it right.
You said it right. Yeah, I think club was used at one point. Project was used at one point, but it is.
I always have trouble with that. It's
a mouthful. It's Sir John left us that one, but I kind of like it. I like the 100 proof part. I just like to call them 100 proofs. But yeah, 100 proof book project where we take a storyline, a graphic novel, maybe a few issues of a certain book, and we discuss it. So tonight, on the other end of the Zoom-nator microphone, we've got a guy who's been with us several times so far, and he is back again. And he doesn't even know this, and I'm going to explain. I don't know if Lloyd even knows this, but he has a brand new nickname on Pine Comics. Have you heard of this yet?
I listened to the episode.
So the Friday the 13th thing, you saw that?
I did.
All right. So we have been doing that Lloyd hasn't been doing, but Larry, myself, and Stu from SWO Productions have been doing these videos where we go through every Friday the 13th film. So we did Friday the 13th Part 5 most recently to this recording. There's a character in Friday the 13th Part 5. Now, this is a quick funny story. As I'm watching it, the sheriff character in that film, I said to myself, this guy reminds me of Mike Simonetta. That's who our guest is, Mike Simonetta. And I said to myself, I'm going to bring it up next time we do this episode. Then I said, you know what? I'm not going to do it because in my life, I've many times have brought up to somebody in my life and gone, this guy looks like that guy. And I'm always shot down. Like, I don't know if I have like a weird eye, but people always go, you're fucking nuts. That guy doesn't look like that guy. So I was going to say to Larry, who's good friends with Mike, the cop looked like Mike Simonetta. I'm like, no, I'm going to say it. Larry's going to go, you're fucking crazy. Larry, during the course of the show, when we discussed the sheriff, calls him Officer Mike Simonetta. And I was like, I almost came out of my seat. So yeah, he is now Officer Mike Simonetta. And he has been on with us before. You may remember him from our top 10 character actors episode. Also, at this point, we talked with him on a Pint Movie Invitational. We did Swimming with Sharks with Frank Whaley and Kevin Spacey. Right. Yeah. Mike, what's been going on, man? How have you been doing?
I've been doing good, thanks. It was fun to watch your episode and to learn that I was now Officer Mike. You know, what the heck?
Yeah.
And you're right, Larry immediately was like, of course. I had a few questions on it. I sent some pictures around to my friends, but that's all right. I love the new moniker.
I think it just happened to be the guy was a silver fox like you know, and I don't think if you looked at his face, it was so much that, but maybe it just entranced us and just went right to Simonetta.
That's all good. It's all good. See, even now you said I'm Silver Fox, ruined it. Everybody knows.
Oh no, you rock it, man. You rock it. I like that. I love that.
You got the goatee.
You got everything. Yeah,
pepper. It's great.
All right. So yeah, it was fun, and I've been listening to your episodes. It's been great. Your breakdown of Friday the 13th was great. I went through them all. It was funny stuff, and I'm glad you guys agreed, because a lot of horror fans are like the whole thing, and it really drops off after the beginning, 4 and 5, and it just gets to be a mess.
I have a sentimental attachment to 5. And I think I gave it a 4, and I think Larry actually audibly gasped when I gave it a 4.
You're correct.
Yeah, him and Stu hate that one, and I said 4, and they're like, and even the people on our little watch party, the listeners are like, are you fucking nuts? I'm like, we got like 6 more, 5 more for it to really go downhill, and I've seen a few of these recently.
How many are there?
So there are 10 in the original canon, which end with Jason X, which is in space. We are going to do Freddy vs. Jason, which technically is, a spinoff. And then we are going to do the 2009 reboot that went nowhere. In the 2009 reboot, Lloyd, you and I don't know if you're going to remember who it was. We met the guy who played Jason at Terrificon. Do you remember Derek Mears?
Oh, Derek Mears played Jason, huh?
He played Jason.
He's great.
He's great. Such a nice guy. He played Swamp Thing in the Swamp Thing television show that got canceled on the day it came out. And he played one of the Predators in the Adrian Brody-led, Robert Rodriguez-produced Predators film. So, so here we are, 100 Proof Book Project. We are going to talk tonight about, and this is very fitting because even though they'll come out apart from each other, our last recording also revolved around the same character, just in a much different light. We are here to talk about Batman Year One.
which is obviously a pretty integral and cornerstone.
Pretty
good. It's a pretty important book in the Batman mythos. I want to ask you guys, first of all, I'm going to ask Mike, because Mike is a comic reader, and we've talked about, and we're going to do more of these with Mike. You kind of seem, when we talked about doing 100 proof in the past, you kind of seem to lean towards a lot of like the Ed Brubaker crime stuff, criminal, those things. We had talked about a few other things. Are you a superhero fan? And I guess to narrow it down more, are you a Batman fan of any type?
I am a Batman fan. Where I lean is I like to read contained story arcs or stories. So I find that something gets lost when you're at hundreds and hundreds of issues, and when you are locked into having to say, like, he fought this guy last time and he hurt his left foot. He was talking to that lady. And then when he come right into the next one, well, he's got to be limping on his next foot and we got to finish this thing with the next lady. So I love these self-contained stories. Although it was funny, I didn't realize, because I read this in a graphic novel form, I didn't realize that this was just like 405 to 409 or whatever it is of the main comic. That was very surprising to me. Because it is separate, and it seems very strange after 400 episodes or 400 comic books to then say, here's year one. But to go back, I am a big Batman fan, and to follow the logic that I'm talking about, my favorite Batman series is the ones where they just do separate story arcs. So they're all the graphic novels, because they do a lot of separate graphic novels. But then there's also Legends of the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
And I loved that series because they would just let one author do 3 to 5, and it took place at a specific time in Batman's life, but you didn't need to worry about what was he doing the one before, what was he doing the one after. That author just talked about whatever character he was facing, and did as big or as broad a story as they want to do. And they let them do radically different art. So that is my absolute favorite Batman series.
Okay.
I am right there with you, Mike. I mean, when I first came into comics, which maybe less than 10 years ago, really, it was very daunting to me to think that I could follow any of these superheroes that have been around for so long. And I really glommed on to Batman, just like you're saying, because it had, at least I found, more self-contained stories that, were very enjoyable.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I think, I read this one originally. I took it out of the library. I'm just looking around in the library. Oh, this one looks pretty good. And we won't get into it, but yeah, I enjoyed it.
So you answered my second question, Lloyd. You have read this before.
Yes.
All right.
I bought the 2015 version that came with the video DVD and a Blu-ray. It's a hardcover.
Oh.
Looks like this here.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Packed.
I only have a crappy paperback.
Discs packed into the back cover.
Wow.
It's pretty awesome. And it came with a digital copy. It's great.
Mike, Officer Mike, have you read year one before?
Officer Mike.
Yes, I read it. As I mentioned, I read it as a graphic novel form. Not this one, but when it first got big, because it was the same time as The Dark Knight Returns. So, like, in that, which was pretty amazing. In that same year, I think you get the beginning of Batman and the end of Batman,
right.
And they're great stories. They're great stories.
Right.
Alpha and Omega.
So let's get through some of the what this is of Batman Year One. Mike had said it. He got the numbers a little bit off, but just a tiny bit. This was Batman Volume 1, 404 through 407, which were released in February through May of 1987. This is written by Mr. Frank Miller, who also did The Dark Knight Returns, which, if you don't know what that is, you know what? Why don't the three of us just right now say it? Let's come back and do The Dark Knight Returns as well. Let's bookend this. So we'll do that at some point and tack that on as well. So he wrote The Dark Knight Returns. He had a very long and celebrated run on Daredevil. He pretty much brought the character out of the basement of Marvel Comics, which it had laid for a long time. Daredevil sold so poorly at one point in the 60s that they added Black Widow to the title and made it Daredevil and Black Widow because they thought that would bring sales up. And that didn't work either. It didn't really help until Frank Miller took over. And of course, he created Sin City, well known for that. This was penciled by David Mazzucchelli, who also worked with Frank Miller on some Daredevil. He did recently a creator-owned thing which sounds like something that my father would have removed, at a doctor's office in his 70s. Asterios polyp. It sounds like, I'm sorry, sir. It's an Asterios polyp. And another book called City of Glass. He doesn't have a super big. His output of work isn't so much in popular comics. It's more like independent stuff and his own personal things. But
that where it is, because I was looking to find some stuff for this guy that I knew, and because he deserves to be out there. Oh my god!
Oh yeah, and this
guy is fantastic,
and he's a known name in comics. Like if you say David Mazzucchelli, everybody knows that's the Batman Year One guy. That he did. I think he did Daredevil Born Again as well. That's what he did with Frank Miller. This was originally conceived as a graphic novel. Denny O'Neil, who recently passed, longtime Batman writer, he was the editor on the book at the time. He convinced Frank Miller to just add it into the regular series, and the reason being is that the regular series, the Batman series, was super slow sales wise. For example, monthly at that point, it was putting out about 75,000 copies a month, which in the 80s, that was very low for them, especially seeing that it jumped up to like 193,000, like when it started getting popular again. Miller was initially felt really constrained by the continuity and sticking to DC canon when they decided to put it into the regular series. And essentially, Denny O'Neil said, you don't have to worry about that. Like, yes, we want you to keep it to a point, but at the same time, you're dealing with Year One. So you don't have to worry about what the Joker has done because none of that has really happened yet at this point. He was also concerned about standard issue page count, restricting his storytelling because if it was a graphic novel, this ends up being probably like about 90 pages or whatever. A graphic novel, it could have been 200 pages. And at one point, it was
it because it's so tight,
Yeah, it's super tight. 4 issues.
The storytelling is perfect. It's just as long as it needs to be, and
it's great with the date along the top of the chapters, and then you're like, okay, this is late October. Now we're in November, so. You don't have to sweat that, what happened for 2 weeks. We're just like getting to the beats.
Yeah, we're hitting the greatest hits, and there's a thread that goes throughout the whole rest of the thing. The only other little factoid I had about this was, if this was done in the 90s or 2000s or now, it would have worked this way. But initially, there was a point where DC wanted to make this issue 1 of Batman Volume 2. So they were going to stop Volume 1, let Frank Miller do 4 issues. Year 1 would be like, not a new origin, but it would be a new starting point, and then go on. And Frank Miller talked them out of it. He said, no, just plop me right in there. I don't care. Obviously, he doesn't care what.
Yeah, put it right in the middle.
Right in the middle. Because if you really think about it, a lot of writers, or the way that these companies work nowadays, would make it like issue 400 to 404. It would have to be 400. You know what I mean? The first issue would have to be a round number. This is 404 to 407. There is nothing flashy about that.
It was very strange when I went back and I realized that was very strange.
Super
Just the
strange.
idea, and I don't even understand why they wouldn't have done at 400. Because 400 is a great run to cut that and call this, Volume 2 or whatever. At that time, it's probably Volume 5. Really, it's kind of mind-boggling looking back to think they didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I guess back then they had a little more faith in everything sales wise. But yeah, so that's kind of like the how this came together. Let's talk about the players involved in the story. Manster has given us our characters to talk about. We're going to just go on a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into the story itself. So I'm going to start with there's a little character named Bruce Wayne / Batman. If you don't know already, we give you the spoiler warning at the beginning of Piney Comics, but here it goes. Bruce Wayne is Batman. If you did not know this, I'm sorry. At this point in the story, he's a 25-year-old guy who has just come back from a 12-year self-imposed exile. Basically, he's traveled the world. Okay, now if you're not a comic reader, think Batman Begins, because you kind of see that in Batman Begins. He has gone, he's learned martial arts, he's learned how to hunt men, he says at one point. He's just essentially becoming the world, a detective. He's becoming a physical monstrosity because he's coming back to avenge his parents' death.
You know what's great about this too? The story writing. They don't have to go back and show you these things.
Yeah,
there's a lot of times that kind of stuff detracts. They don't go back. They don't show you flashbacks of his training and little montages and stuff.
Not at all.
It's just enough to just tell you, and that's it. Move on.
Yeah, and in fact, you see the killing of his parents as a cover, not in the book itself.
And just
They don't have to go through
just
it.
one
Yeah.
sheet, one page.
Yeah, one quick little flash. There was one bit talking about like not really talking about his or showing his training that I liked was the first time that he goes out as Batman in this, because the first half of the book or the first bit of the book, he's trying to do things. He doesn't have the identity of Batman yet. He's just trying to do things as like a vigilante. The first time he goes out dressed up as a bat, he says like in a bit of dialogue that he uses a scream he learned in Africa to intimidate the criminals that he's like dropping in on. And that right there, that one sentence just tells you enough. Okay, he spent some time in Africa. Here's the technique he learned. Does it work perfectly? No, because he almost gets his ass kicked by 3 like teenagers at that point. But that's Batman Bruce Wayne. The next character, now, if I'm gonna pick at this book a little bit, which I'm gonna do, we all gonna do, is I get it. This was Batman 404 through 407. It's in the Batman title. When this thing got rebranded for trade paperback, I almost wish it was either called Gotham Year One or Gordon Year One, because Jim Gordon is the next character, and this is more his story almost in my eyes than it is Batman's story. It's so crazy how and again, I've read this before. It's been a while. I probably haven't read this in 10 years. As I picked this up, I read this afternoon, so it was the first chance I had. And I was like, wow, we're so heavy into Gordon. When are we going to get heavier into Batman? You really don't get heavier into Bruce Wayne. He obviously shows up. He's obviously there, but because I think what it is that Gordon is the human element in this story. He's the square peg in the round hole, as to say, in the Gotham, and he's seeing things in a different light. But for the story, he's a newly transferred police detective from Chicago. He's got a pregnant wife who, it says a lot that when he moves to Gotham, he's praying she's not pregnant because he doesn't want to raise a kid in this shithole.
Right, he wants a test to be negative.
He's hoping her pregnancy test is negative because he's afraid to raise a kid in the shithole. It is not. It's positive. He's going to have a kid. He's got to deal immediately with like the worst corruption ever. Like just the worst corruption ever. I don't know about you guys, but was one of your favorite moments when he kicked the shit out of what was his name? Flass,
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, and I think this this book humanizes both Gordon and Batman, but I think we've never ever had Gordon before. He was just always Commissioner Gordon forever, and he always had a bat symbol, and he threw it up, and Batman showed up, and that was it. And here you really see him as a real human. And I thought the opening was amazing because he's coming in on the train, and he's looking out the window, and he's like, "This place is a shithole." And Bruce Wayne's coming in on a private jet, and he's like, "Hey, this place is great." So it's kind of just like this great.
Because he wants to be on the plane, and Batman wants to be on the train.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, it's probably great on the train," and then Gordon's like, "This place is a shithole." Yeah, it was great juxtaposition.
Yeah, he deals with. He has we'll get into it in a bit. He has a partner, a very welcome to 2020 cop partner who is a real. He's not a good guy like Officer Mike. He's a bad guy. This guy. He intimidates. He hurts. He's beaten up on suspects for no reason. And at one point, there's a little bit of a confrontation between him and Gordon. And Gordon gets a soap party, basically, if you've ever seen Full Metal Jacket, by the other cops because he's too much of a goody two shoes. And he goes and finds Flass, and he's assessed him totally. He's a Green Beret, and this is the first time in at least this canon that you get to learn that Jim Gordon isn't to be fucked with. Jim Gordon's like, it's been a while since I've had to fuck up a Green Beret, but I'm going to do it again today. And just to prove it, he gives him a baseball bat to give him a handicap advantage. He says,
"Yeah, that's right."
I love that bit. I love that bit. And then last but not least, it's Barbara Gordon. Now, Barbara Gordon is not who you think it is in this. It is not the Barbara Gordon who becomes Batgirl or Oracle. Commissioner Gordon's wife. You really don't get a whole heck of a lot with her until kind of the end. And when you do get with her, when she starts to become a little bit more involved in the machinations of the plot, it's good stuff. But she's essentially just the pregnant wife at home while he is, on the front lines. We drop back in with her every once in a while. There was one scene that I thought was weird. I don't know if you guys thought it was weird too. There's a scene where Gordon goes to Wayne Manor because he's convinced that Bruce Wayne might be Batman. He's going to
Barbara's with him.
It was weird.
Why did he bring his wife on an not an interrogation, but he's going to.
Well, didn't he get called on the way? I mean, they were like driving home, and I think they called him and said, Bruce Wayne is requesting to see you. So he didn't want to lose that. And she was with him, so he went right over.
Okay, then that makes sense, because I must have missed that, and I'm reading it. I'm like, why would you bring your pregnant wife to a possible like fucking psychopath's house? Who do you want to go next, Master?
Mike can go next.
All right, so my lineup here,
Officer Mike, excuse me.
Officer Mike. So probably the biggest name here on my list is Alfred Pennyworth. So Batman / Bruce Wayne's longtime butler. And here we see him taking on a very snarky mantle. He does get mentioned that he is a medic. So, we're setting up the idea that Batman goes out and gets the shit kicked out of him and he comes home and he can take care of him. We also get some snarky comments where he's alluding to the fact that Bruce Wayne doing this in the middle of the night is a bit psychotic. He's a really interesting character, though, because in the early Batman comics, he's kind of goofy. And he's a lot of just a comic relief at sometimes, or he's just literally answering the door or whatever. In some of the later comics, so there's very interesting ways they handled him. Sometimes they would do him where he would actually go out, like if Batman gets too much in trouble. Like I know there's one in the Legends of the Dark Knight where Batman himself gets kidnapped and Alfred goes out and saves him, and they end up fighting through. I think it's like a tropical jungle somewhere to get out. So that was kind of interesting. And I don't know if you guys ever read Earth One, where
I read the first volume of that. Yeah,
did read that, yeah.
So, but they made in that one. He joins when Bruce Wayne's very young, and Alfred is the Special Forces master, and he's the one that actually in that one teaches Bruce Wayne to kick ass and whatever. So a lot of very interesting setups of Alfred overall. But here we see what we've seen kind of moving forward, a good butler, always a medic to him, always there for him, seemingly has no life whatsoever because he's just there to help Bruce Wayne and
That's
Batman.
Right. Poor Alfred.
Poor Alfred. The next one that I was assigned to, we have Carmine Falcone. So he's the head of the Gotham Mafia. Keeping with this book's kind of grounded feel, it's they hint near the end that there are super villains, but the bad guys here are really just mafia
gangsters.
Gangsters, yeah. They're doing robberies. They're selling drugs, prostitution, the kind of quote unquote usual stuff. So it's real crime. Carmine is the head of the mafia, so he's an obvious target for Batman. We've seen him a couple other times in the books, but he's mostly here, and then also in the movies, the Nolan movies. He's also there. He teaches Batman about fear, which is a little heavy. And then I didn't actually know this, but I looked in some research that he actually gets killed in The Long Halloween, and then his daughter takes over. But for the most part, we don't see a lot of him outside of these direct interpretations because, again, he's a real quote-unquote criminal, just a mafia hood and runs a mafia family.
And this was the first appearance of Carmine Falcone.
Yep. Completely new from Miller.
Yep.
Played by the great Tom Wilkinson in Batman Begins. He's awesome in it.
And also, we should have mentioned, I don't know if that's the DVD that you have in your set, Lloyd, but the Mask of the Phantasm is basically an animated version of this book. So if you remember back, it's a lot of Year One, there's Carmine Falcone, and it is him. There's a lot of that movie where it's similar to this. Bruce Wayne is not yet the Batman. He's just dressed up in black and trying to, break up crime, nobody cares.
The movie jumps back and forth a lot. With
Mask of the Phantasm, that's included in the animated series DVD set.
Yeah, it's a great movie, and by many people, it's considered by many people to be the best Batman film. And I remember reading an article with Paul Dini, who wrote for animated series and wrote Mask of the Phantasm. And that movie was released on Christmas Day of 1993. And he was talking about how he went to see it with his family on Christmas Day with like 4 other people in the theater.
Of course, nobody, right?
And movie theaters aren't empty on Christmas Day. You know, they actually have a pretty busy day usually. It's just
I've seen movies on Christmas before.
I when me and my friends, when I was in my like late teens and 20s, it was a yearly thing. We'd go out on Christmas night. I can remember specifically seeing Tombstone on Christmas night. I remember seeing Jerry Maguire on Christmas night, and I remember seeing, I don't know why this sticks in my head, but I remember seeing, let me see if Mike can get this one. I know the title. Do you know the title? Jean-Claude Van Damme, Powers Booth, Die Hard during the Stanley Cup Finals.
Die Hard during the Stanley. No, I don't know that one.
Sudden Death. Sudden Death.
Oh, of course. Of course.
You had me
yes.
at Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Well, yeah. JCVD gets just about everybody going. So
yeah. Very, very highly recommended. After, I would say read this, but then Mask of the Phantasm, great. I think, if I remember correctly, part of the problem was at that time, people were not into adult animated movies. Like,
oh yeah,
it was still like animation is cartoons for kids or whatever, and that you would not pay full price to watch a 2-hour animated movie.
And just think, like 6 years later, South Park the movie came out and fucking crushed.
Changed it all. Yeah. So Carmine Falcone, interesting, and yes, he was. Tom Wilkinson did a great job with him, but you don't see him a heck of a lot. He's only in a very few things, and he only in a couple other places. Again, because he's just a regular criminal. Last person I had down was Arnold Floss. So you were talking, John, in the beginning that Gordon gets set up with a bad partner. This is Arnold Floss. As soon as he comes in, we know he's immediately bad because he starts talking about smacking guys around and getting money on the take, and hey, I got to go do a deal over here with these people that are doing drugs, etc. And Gordon picks up on it immediately.
Picks up a kid like on the way back from the airport.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It's immediate, like that. This is like the
right
worst
away.
cop ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's actually not seen in a heck of a lot more than this. So we see him here, and he's an essential part of I think Gordon becoming what would eventually be Commissioner Gordon. But then he also kind of leaves town. Well, goes to jail actually at the point. The only other time I saw when he was there is he's in Batman Begins, the Nolan, as a crooked partner. So again, Nolan pulled quite a bit for Batman Begins from this work. So he's also in there. Very minor character, but he was a guy, he had a big beard on, but he was in that movie also, Arnold Floss, and bad guy.
After he realizes, hey, James Gordon is not really on board with what we're doing here, he's the one who goes to Commissioner Loeb and says, Jimmy, this guy, he's just not working out, and he wants to do something. And Loeb says, well, not while I'm in town. I'm heading out of town in a couple weeks.
Yeah, you can give him
do what you want.
You can give him your soap party when I'm at the ball or whatever.
Yeah.
As John mentioned, this is like the most corrupt from top to bottom I think we've ever seen a Gotham.
Oh, you also had that pretty good scene later with Floss where Gordon is explaining Batman to the people. He's got like the pictures on the wall, and then he goes, all right, go ahead, Floss. Tell him what you know about him.
Yeah. Oh,
and he just totally exaggerates and says, oh, he's got his 30-foot wingspan and you can shoot bullets right through him.
He's not human is what he says. Yeah.
He's not human.
Yeah. And that's part of the mystique of Batman that we don't always see in the movies or even in the comic, that because we as an audience are used to reading about Batman, but essentially people in Gotham aren't even supposed to believe in him. They're supposed to, even though like he's a thing and he's been a thing forever, in reading time, he's like the boogeyman. And a lot of people don't think he's a real person. A lot of people think he is some kind of monster. And I like that bit because that's like, in year one, that's, we're seeing that. We're seeing someone say, this is not a fucking man, it is a man.
Yeah.
I think that's something that in Burton's 89 Batman, they really get that across. You know, because the criminals are like literally like, what the fuck are you? And then also for a long time there, they show the police when people are like, you believe in the Batman, like you're crazy. Sure.
Right. That's one thing I really like about this. to us, to readers, he's been around for 80 years or so. And we just know who Batman is. Nothing surprises us about him. But if you're just a person in this city, and this bat-looking character comes up out of the dark and surprises you and throw you over the railing, it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, and there's a great line in this too, where he solidifies kind of how he's gaining that effect. He tells out, what does he say to Alfred at one point? Never during the day. Because remember, Alfred says, "Do you want your costume?
Shall I get your tights?"
This is a joke because he's mocking him. Yeah, you can put your tights on.
Yeah. And he says, "Never during the day." He goes out at one point, and this is at the end of the book, to do some Batman stuff, but just in a longshoreman's hat and leather jacket and stuff. All right, so is that it for Mike? Mike, was that your last character?
Characters, yep.
All right, let's go to Manster and finish off the character round.
So I got Gillian Loeb, the Gotham City police commissioner, who we normally think of as Gordon, but not yet. Gordon's just a detective, has been transferred. This guy's very corrupt, gets hits on people. They got drug trafficking. He's got all kinds of stuff going on. He's also a personal friend of Carmine Falcone.
Yeah.
The mob boss. And he's actually having dinner with him in his house at one point. Mm-hmm. Batman comes in and puts an end to that and says, what does he say? You're done eating on, the people of the city or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty terrifying moment there. So that guy's just a total piece of shit. And he's drawn to look, he looks exactly like you think he would look.
Yeah, he's like a fat, balding weasel. He's a weasel character.
Yeah.
Yep. So then you have a minor appearance of Harvey Dent, Gotham City's assistant district attorney. Like I said, he doesn't have a huge role, but he does play a role in setting certain things in motion with internal affairs. He sort of works Batman. At one point, Batman's in his office, and I think Gordon comes in, and Batman hides behind a desk. Yeah,
but I think I think he sets it up nice though too. I think it's what Miller's doing is pointing out that they make a point to show he's the only not corrupt. Besides Gordon,
that's right.
The only other not corrupt person there,
right? Which is also
Gordon, Batman, and Harvey Dent.
Which is also a plot thread that Nolan picks up in the second movie. Dent is the true hero that Gotham deserves until, circumstances make him not anymore. It's funny. We keep going back and talking about the Nolan stuff. What's his name? The guy that did Requiem for a Dream. I'm losing his name off the top of my head.
Aaron something. Well, I'll look it up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So David, Black Swan, that director, Mike's going to figure it out. Darren Aronofsky. He was going to make Batman Year One in 2000. This was before Batman Begins was a thing. They were going to make Batman Year One. It was going to be the reboot from Batman and Robin. By the way, earlier in the episode when I had said we had recorded two very despairing Batman episodes, right before we recorded this one about 3 days ago, we did an episode about Batman Forever. So you get the disparity between those two things. one really good thing and one really not good thing. But anyways, Aronofsky was going to make Year One, and Frank Miller was going to write it. And the reason this thing broke apart, never happened. But one of the reasons is, and I thought this was funny, was that Frank Miller said that he couldn't work with Aronofsky because it was the only person he's ever worked with that thought of Batman in darker tones than he did. He was just like, you're going too far. And if you've ever seen Requiem for a Dream, it's on my short list of movies that I think are really good that I would never fucking watch ever again in a million years because it's such a night. You've seen it, Mike?
Oh yeah. It's a great film, but it's so dark.
Yeah, literally.
I've never seen that.
You know what?
You walk away depressed.
If you ever felt like, I want to see a good piece of filmmaking, watch Requiem for a Dream, and then maybe 3 weeks later go, would I ever watch that again? The answer is fucking no.
No way.
And this was the guy who was going to originally do Year One, and again, Miller was like, this guy is too dark for me. So I'm sorry, I just threw that out as a little factoid.
No, that's interesting.
And I also want to point out, you're talking about Harvey Dent. At one point, Harvey Dent is a suspect in this for being Batman.
That's my next character. So the next character I've got is Sarah Essen, a detective working, with the Gotham City Police. Hangs out quite a bit with James Gordon. We find they have a little relationship going. a little budding romance. So at one point, let's see, it was Gordon who thought that Harvey Dent could possibly be the Batman, right? And then when does go to visit him, like I mentioned before, he's got some weights in there, and Gordon's like trying to lift the weights and stuff. So yeah, he was an early suspect.
Yeah.
But this lady, Sarah Essen, the detective, she's kind of smart, because she's the one that figured, hey, Batman or Bruce Wayne, he's got the money to do all this stuff, and he's not here. He's conveniently in Switzerland, on a ski trip. He broke his he said he broke 2 legs and an arm just where he got the bullets.
Batman gets shot a lot in this. Like,
yes. He gets stabbed. He gets shot.
He gets stabbed at one point. He takes, I think, 2 bullets actually, and then at the end he gets shot again. But he's wearing armor finally. Yeah, he gets fucked up.
Although I did think it was funny that to keep that background, he shoots over to Switzerland, and they make a point of showing that he does a loop on his skis, and I was like, that's a lot to do for anybody. And like, this guy just got shot twice.
I thought the same thing when I was reading that.
But it's amusing.
So Detective Sarah Essen, beautiful woman, and Gordon is finding himself with her a lot and making excuses, and they go to a coffee shop. There's actually a beautiful scene, like one of the panels in there is a take on that famous painting.
Yeah,
actually two famous paintings.
The diner.
The first one is called Nighthawks, and that was by Edward Hopper. He was the painter of the original.
Well, and that was the name of the diner,
and
too.
that was what was written on the diner, because the more famous painting, I guess, would be Boulevard of Broken Dreams. We've got was it Humphrey Bogart, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley,
James Dean.
Yep.
All sitting at a diner counter. Yep.
So I thought it was really a nice, beautiful little thing where, it's the same sort of scene, and it says Hopper over the top there.
Yep.
But yeah, he's falling for her, and I guess they do have an affair. They don't really ever show that. They show them kissing, but they definitely have an affair. At one point when he's in the diner, I think she makes some kind of comment like, I didn't get a couple other jobs because they thought I was too masculine.
And she's super hot. Yeah,
she's super hot. Like, they're like, well, they were either deaf, dumb, or dead, or all three, or something like that.
Yeah, she's a total blonde bombshell who happens to be a cop. Yeah, and she also, they mentioned, right, that she's also from Chicago. So that like kind of endears the two of them together as well.
And they also kind of hint that she comes from Nazi lineage.
Did they?
Do they?
Yeah, because they talk about she's
German, yeah,
she's only 1 year off. Like, her parents just came over, and she's a strong German blonde. So there's a lot of she's a strange character, especially because the only real point is that she has an affair with Gordon. She's not really, but all those character ideas of putting that to making her German and saying that she was too masculine and Chicago, it's just a very interesting concept that I don't know where Miller came up with that or why, but interesting backstory.
Now, this was her first appearance. Does she appear in other future Batman stories?
I got to be honest, it's not familiar to me, but there's so many Batman stories she could have popped in.
There's so many out there.
Yeah.
And this was another thing that actually humanizes Gordon, because you always think of Gordon as, upstanding guy and, just a good guy. You don't really picture him having an affair while his wife is, pregnant.
That's the funny part about his character in the story, is that he literally is like the one good guy in Gotham law enforcement, yet and you're rooting for him because he's not corrupt, he's not crooked, but meanwhile his 8-month pregnant wife is home and he's banging his partner. So it takes a little bit away from him on that end. Mm-hmm. So it's like he's good in this one section. He's good at his job. He's an upstanding man in terms of law enforcement, but he's doing the fucking worst thing ever, with especially with a baby on the way.
Although there's plenty of inner dialogue with him. He recognizes he's a piece of shit.
Oh yeah, no, he knows.
We should say that because this is really humanizing him, that he's not the perfect guy that that Commissioner Gordon always seemed to be. I think there's a lot of him taking on off his glasses, which goes to the point when he, John, were you saying he kicks Flass's ass? Because again, the little guy in the glasses you don't think is going to be a badass fighter, but he is. So, it's a real change to him. But I like it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's great.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
And the last major character here, I guess, is another first appearance, Selena Kyle / Catwoman. In this one, she is a prostitute living in the East End. She's taking care of Holly Robinson, a young girl who's also working the streets. Or is it maybe no Holly? I'm sorry, Holly Robinson is her first appearance.
Yes.
Selena's been around.
Yeah, I just read that wrong off my notes. So Holly's the first appearance, but Selena's typically not a prostitute as far as I can remember,
and not a dominatrix either. She's
correct.
the scene where they introduce her is very adult, especially for a book that came out in 1987 that kids were reading, because she's essentially at the window watching, some stuff happening on the street. And if you read it, the guy in her room is like basically coming all over himself, waiting for her to go back in there and smack his balls around. It's not like it's
right.
not thinly veiled. It's like, why don't you come back in and teach me a lesson, Selena? And she's like, I'll be back in. She's probably got like a spade on a whip that she's cracking this guy in the nuts with, and he's getting off on it.
Yeah, and I got the impression he's back in that room tied up.
Yes. Oh yeah.
She goes she's over to the window and he's tied up.
Oh yeah. He's got his hands,
the whips.
He's got his hands over his head, tied up to something over his head. Nipples have alligator clamps on them. He's probably wearing a mask with a fucking like a clown face on it that she keeps punching him in. Yeah. It's weird. It's weird. And you mentioned Holly. What is it with I guess it's a way of showing inflection, but like I like how her dialogue is all like, "Hey, Selena, where are you going?" Like they highlight certain words.
They're stressing certain syllables.
Yeah,
I think it's to get across that because there's a little, when we first see her, there's a hint that she's ridiculously young to be a prostitute.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of her dialogue leads to that because she's also very naive. So
yeah. Oh no, I read it as like a character trait, but I thought it was interesting how they did. There's a lot of interesting choices in this in terms of that.
Selena.
Yeah, Selena.
That's
Yeah,
how I read it.
like a little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
I also like when you get into the book and all of the inner monologuing is Gordon or Wayne, and Gordon's is like a handwritten note, and Wayne's is a handwritten note but in cursive. I like the fact that they broke that up,
and they were colored. Like I think Gordon's is yellow, Wayne's is in white, so that even if it oversperses the other box, whose thoughts it is. Yeah, so it was smart. It was very smart.
Yeah. And Holly's the one who did get the jump on Batman or Bruce Wayne and stabbed him right in the leg.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Taught him the lesson to never underestimate anybody.
Right. Which Batman does a few times in the course of this book.
Well, he even tells himself in that scene where he gets stabbed by Holly, he goes out into the streets. He doesn't have the Batman persona yet. That's coming. He makes himself up. He wears a scar on his face because he knows that a scar will be what everybody's looking at, and he wants that. But he even says to himself, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, this probably isn't the right move. And what ends up happening, a 12-year-old hooker stabs him in the fucking femoral artery, basically, and that's what you get.
Yeah. And I like even too that the pimp points out to him, like, what are you, Vice? Like, you're dressed up as like a Vietnam vet. Like, nobody dresses up like a Vietnam vet. So even his attempt at like, I'm gonna blend in with the criminals is terrible.
Yeah, it's no good. He's got a lot to learn, that's for sure. And that's where we get to at the end of the first issue, is he's looking for, what is it going to be that I'm going to use? And as he's sitting there, essentially bleeding out on his chair, he's about to ring the bell to get Alfred to come and help him, and a fucking bat crashes through the window of Wayne Manor. And this has been done. It was done like we said, we just did the Batman Forever episode. It was done in that movie. This has been done a million different ways, but I really just like the way this one ends. The bat comes through. He immediately says, I'm going to be a bat. And then it ends with his hand on the bell, not ringing the bell, just bleeding on it. And then when we get to him in the next issue, we get Batman. Although what I like about this too is that in a lot of books, you would get that ending, right? Where the bat crashes through, I'm going to be a bat. And then in issue 2, he's like fucking fully formed Batman. No, he still sucks. He's still like really not great yet. Like he almost
Still
again
figuring it out.
He's figuring out. He's fighting 3 essentially teenage kids on a fire escape, and he almost kills one by mistake. He almost gets killed by on his own. He's just fucking things up left and right.
Yeah, and I think that was another homage because he's talking to a bust of his father, and then the bat comes in and lands on it. So that's like the Raven, where the Raven lands on the bust above the sad person's door. So I see that a lot, you know, as they're doing a take on that, you know, where the bat comes through, lands on the bust, and the bust of the father is like their central item. Yeah. So I mean, I again, you know, like he's going back with the Hopper diner scene. He's doing a lot of imagery here that I think calls back on some classic pieces of art as he's going through.
You just said a word I want to focus on for a second. Let's jump away from the story for a minute, or at least the written story. Let's talk each about, we'll start with Manster. What do you think of the art in this book? What do you think of Mazzucchelli's art?
I happen to love Mazzucchelli. I don't know. I call it Mazzucchelli, but whatever. Yeah, no, I love the art. It's exceptionally well done, I think, for a comic book. I think in this time period, you know, the 1980s, I just can't imagine anybody not liking this art. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like this style, I don't like that. I just don't see what's not to like about the art. Yeah, I think it's really good. It's gritty, grimy, dark.
It's not clean. It's not like clean comic art. It's not, you know, very defined lines
in any way.
It's not slick. This is it almost, you know, I don't want to say reminds me of, but we talked about Scalp not too long ago. Very much like that. Like people seem real. People seem fat and people seem doughy, and even the heroes don't seem like they're like perfectly chiseled people. I don't always want that in my superhero comic art, but it works here incredibly.
It's so good here. And it reads just like a storyboard to a movie, you know, rather than a typical, you know, stylized comic book.
Right.
And one of the things I love about it too is I think, and you know, I know it's his style, but in choosing this artist, this also feels very classic. Because when you think about art from this time, we're moving into that point, like you hinted at a little there, John, where every character was a super hot woman and a super jacked guy.
Right.
And this is not only gritty, but it's simple. It's got plenty of detail, so I don't want to sell it in the wrong way. But it's not over. There's not tons of extra lines of extra detail and extra items, and there's very solid coloring throughout. There's not, you know, we're not getting a lot of shades and whatever. It does remind me.
Is his wife?
Miller's wife?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. The artist, Mazzucchelli's wife, is the color artist.
Yeah. What was her name? Richmond?
Richmond Lewis.
Richmond Lewis. That is the sexiest woman's name I've ever heard, by the way. I don't know how any
man names.
Yeah, I don't know how any guy doesn't hear the words Richmond Lewis and immediately get a boner.
But the art reminded me of like really classic. It's certainly better, but it reminded me of a 50s, 60s art style. I think he's definitely given that feel, and that makes sense to say if this is year one, because like the original year one is you know in the 40s, 50s. So it's
some beautiful. I mean, he does some really beautiful work with the light and the dark, the different shading that they get in there.
Yep,
I love this stuff. You know, you mentioned Scalped, which I really love the art in Scalped, and this is a level above that to me.
Oh yeah. I definitely think it's. I was just using that as a reference to, instead of saying like Jim Lee comic art, you know, exactly. Where, you know, everybody is like Mike said, you know, chiseled guys and beautiful women with giant tits. And, you know, this is more like real people, you know, like Essen is beautiful, but she looks like like Jim Gordon is fucking her, you know, and he's essentially kind of like this schlubby guy, you know, with, you know, kind of schlubby guy with glasses.
Well, he's pretty jacked.
Well, no, but I mean schlubby in the sense of like, he's not, you know, they do his style. They make it a point every time you see Bruce Wayne in this, he looks like a model, even if it's just, you know, when he's putting on airs, you know, because that's what Bruce Wayne's supposed to look like. He's supposed to be a good looking guy, you know, and Gordon is just, I guess schlubby's not the right word, average looking dude, Just like if you walk by Gordon in a mall, you'd never look at him. If you walk by Bruce Wayne, you go, fuck, that dude is good looking, like, holy shit.
Yeah. Because you get the Gordon's got the glasses, the kind of 70s porn star stash. He's always got the I don't know if is it a raincoat or a trench coat on. Yeah. So he's dressed down all the time.
He smells like cigarettes all the time. Yeah.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
That jacket just reeks of fucking cigarette smoke. I laughed at one of the
Marlboros.
Yeah, they were Marlboros too. They probably changed the title, but yeah. Let's talk a little bit about bits and pieces of this book that we each found pretty memorable, or scenes that we really liked a lot. We'll start with Mike, Officer Mike. Give us one thing that you particularly liked, like one, whether it be a panel or a little bit in the book.
I think one of the things that I really liked was his fight through the deserted building when and we've kind of seen this if you've read Batman comics, you've seen this before. He gets cornered and either all the police or all the bad guys come after him, and I liked the sense of the building on fire again, to go back to the art and just great use of just very basic orange and yellows. And also it was a great scene because, again, you're humanizing these characters, because Batman, I think like 4 or 5 bums die that were just happen to be in that building, die in that scene. And right. Batman, like, he just can't do anything about it and goes. And that's never been there before, because he's always been put up, probably incorrectly so, but almost like an actual superhero, not just a guy who's
right
trying. And he would always save everybody and do these other things, but he's barely hanging on himself. I think it's portrayed well that he's just in this corner. I also think there's the trick where he opens a hatch and then then goes out, and the bad guys think that he's in the hatch. And I think that was all really well plotted and really well drawn, that it wasn't obvious.
80,000 volts.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I thought that was to go to what you were saying, Lloyd, that this feels more like a movie. That was plotted really well. That it was a surprise that he had come up back behind them, while they're looking down in this hatch
up through the chimney, I believe, going through and grabbing a couple guys.
Yeah, that whole scene to me, I thought was just great. It was drawn great. I think it's humanizing Batman, and I just think it got across beautifully. Like this, it's a pretty big action scene. But to go back to what you're talking, John, like, these are just regular comics. It wasn't really that many pages.
Right. Yeah.
But 22. But this is a great action scene in 3 to 4 pages, maybe, and it really struck me.
Yeah, one of my favorite bits in that whole scene. First of all, one of my favorite bits is when he realizes that they're going to drop the bomb on the building. That you see the helicopter coming over, and you're like, "What are they doing?" It's like, "Oh shit!"
I'm glad you said that. I have that right here.
Like, you got the panel open.
Yeah. Gordon's looking there. Half his face is purple, half is red. It says "whoop whoop whoop whoop," and you see the helicopter. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, and they make it a point to say, like, the Commissioner Loeb made sure that it was abandoned, and they were going to do it anyway. It's like, it's bullshit. Okay. And also, if you are a fan and if you've seen Batman Begins, there is a scene in Batman Begins that apes this very much, and even right down to the point where he uses the sonic emitter to surround himself with the bats. That's a very famous. I think that's the cover of. It might be the poster for Batman Begins when he crashes through that window and all the bats are coming down the staircase with him. That it's taken right from this book. This book has informed, and that's the true sign of a great writer and a great memorable series, is that, like Mike and Lloyd, we've all said, this book in little bits and pieces has informed so many other things since 1987. There's bits from Batman the Animated Series that are based on this. Batman Begins is based on this. Dark Knight, grabs the Harvey Dent stuff and bases on it. So this thing is really, paid off for the whole DC universe.
It's funny, to that point. I actually I was reading an article once, not too long ago, and that was this author's point to, I think it was after the Nolan Batman's finished, to whoever's next, please don't reproduce year one, because at this point it's cliche.
Yeah.
Because every single person's done it, and
No.
just take Batman in a new direction. And of course, that went down the tubes with the new DC Batman, but we'll see. We'll see.
Paul Pope's Year 100.
Yeah, that's good. You read that?
Oh yeah, I have that.
That weird futuristic Batman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Try something different. I'll be there. Well, I don't know if I'll be there in line to see it in the theaters when who knows, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I'm looking forward to the Robert Pattinson thing. I got no problem with him. I know a lot of people don't like that guy, and it's almost all based on Twilight. Give him a fucking break. He made 4 movies. Yes, they probably weren't great movies, but you know what? He made money. He's moved on. I've seen him in several things I've liked him in, so he's okay. I have no problem with him.
Yeah. Well, no.
Yeah.
Look, he's I'm not gonna say he's like great, but he's a solid actor. Those are not not good movies, but he's a solid actor. I think that the reverse that comes out of it is I don't know why people keep hiring Kristen Stewart, because she's awful and wooden and was from the beginning. I would see why you would hire Pattinson. He is like the David Cronenberg's buddy. He's like the go-to. It's like Scorsese and De Niro for the past like 5 or 6 movies that Cronenberg's done. He always has Pattinson up there. I think it's solid. I'm with you.
I recommend. He did a movie I saw a few years ago with Guy Pearce called The Rover, an Australian movie.
It's a good movie.
Such a good movie. The ending of that movie, I won't give it away, but it's this movie about Guy Pearce is a guy who they're in a post-apocalyptic Australia, but it's not like Mad Max. It's just like very deserted. He has a car, his car gets stolen, and he spends the whole fucking movie trying to get his car back. And at the end, when you find out why he wants to get his car back, it made me
Wasn't that John Wick 2?
No. This is not action bullshit. This will tug on your heartstrings a little bit. It's so
You
fucking
guys see
good.
way more movies than I do.
You got it, Lloyd. Seriously, it's a slow burn. You'll probably fall asleep 7 or 8 times, but check out The Rover if you can find it.
It might take me about a week to watch.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We know the beauty of it too is that it's a single-minded, not big movie, but single-minded, small-size action movie, because what John said is like from the beginning. I think isn't he at a diner or something? Like he drives up to a diner and somebody steals his car, and then right from that he's like looks out, he's like motherfucker, and then just the whole movie he's like, where's my car? Where's my next guy? Where's my car? And if you're gonna get in my way, I'm gonna fucking kill you.
Yeah,
and that's it. I just want it.
It bounces back between him and the bad guys too, the guys who stole the car, which Pattinson is part of. But it's really good. All right, Manster, give me something in particular in this book that really floated your boat.
Well, Mike was right that the scene in the burning building that was just probably top notch in this book. But I got a couple other little ones. Early on, I think we didn't really mention this too much. Bruce is just doing some training in his own backyard. He smashes through some kind of brick thing that he's got there. He freaking kicks a tree over.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about a little sapling or anything. This is like, an oak tree. Then there's that scene we mentioned briefly when Gordon got into his soap party, which I believe was baseball bats.
Yeah, they beat him.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't soap. They kicked the fuck out of him with baseball bats, yeah.
And then he devises a plan. He goes on his own while he's still freaking just beaten down, probably got some broken ribs. And he tracks down, oh no, wait a minute, was this later maybe?
No, it was right after.
Is it right after?
Yeah, he was still beat up.
Yeah, he tracks
Floss
him down.
and all his buddies that helped do the attack.
Yeah, he goes to one of their houses. They're all having some kind of poker party. They all leave, and he hanging out there waiting for Flash to leave. And there's a scene. It's just him in like shadow. It's just blue and black, and he's just got he's looking sort of down, and he's got his eyes looking up, and he's got the end of a baseball bat in his hand. It's just what's coming. It's awesome. Yeah. And then the final one, when Batman does crash the dinner party, and he comes through, there's just this amazing brown and black image of Batman standing there. You basically see his cowl and sort of like the hunch of his shoulders, and part of his cape is swooping around. And he's like, ladies, gentlemen, you have eaten well. Beaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, your feast is nearly over. From this moment on, none of you are safe.
You know what?
That was a fantastic scene.
Start that one bit all over again.
All right, the whole thing?
Yeah, just read the whole thing again. I'll just edit that last part out and put it together.
So he's standing there. You can see his cowl, his hunched over shoulders. His cape is swooping around. And he says, ladies, gentlemen, you have eaten well. You have eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit. Your feast is nearly over. From this moment on, none of you are safe. Then the lights go out.
And that is essentially the point where the gauntlet is dropped by Batman. Right now, I am going to be in this city from here on out, and you are going to have to deal with me. And they probably at that point, and I think they express it in the book, they think it's a joke. This is a guy in a bat suit. They don't realize that they have just run into the end of the line for them. Now, I don't mean end of the line figuratively, but like this guy is always going to be around, and he is now living up your asshole for the rest of time. Like that's it.
That's right.
I really liked, if I can go for a second, I really liked the ending bit where we get down to the point where Gordon's baby is kidnapped and his wife, and Bruce goes out because it's during the day, we alluded to, not in Batman costume, but he goes out to try to help Gordon because he knows something's going to happen. First of all, I want to say, for an artist or for a book to have a panel in it that actually makes me feel like almost like a clench in my throat, nervous wise, was whenever they would show the what was his name, the nephew or whatever for the mafia, the brute who took the kid.
Oh, yeah, the brute.
Yeah.
Every time they showed him with a switchblade and the little infant baby, it actually like made my throat like close up because just seeing a baby in like the line of like fire basically. But the whole bit where Gordon and him are like struggling, and the way it's drawn where the baby goes off of the bridge, but meanwhile, as the baby's going off the bridge, you got that panel where you could actually see Bruce is already jumping off the top of the bridge. Yeah. And then you get that next panel where the baby's heading towards the water and Gordon's falling towards the water. And then you see Bruce coming down, catching the baby, saves the baby, comes out, and you have this great moment because in all honesty, to this day in Batman, which is now at whatever issue 800 and something, it's never been confirmed that Gordon knows that Bruce is Batman, or if it has, it's been retconned, or it's only in Elseworld stories. This book pretty much tells you that he knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman because they have that whole bit where they have a conversation 2 feet apart from each other, where he says to Bruce, he says, so you've got some armor on under that jacket because Gordon shot him 20 minutes before, not knowing he wasn't a bad guy. And Bruce tells him, yes, I am armored, gives him back his baby, and Gordon makes the point to say, I didn't have my glasses on. They got knocked off, so I don't know who it was. But, like, do you guys feel...
I'm blind without my glasses.
I'm blind without my glasses. Mike, did you feel that that's essentially saying that he knows that that's Bruce?
I think so. I mean, because there's no indication, too, that Bruce... So if he's truly blinded, Bruce could disguise his voice. But there's none of that there. I think that we do know that he's there. And also, I think something Bruce says. So at some point he said, you must be wearing some armor under that jacket. I think there's also the hint there that, that he knows he's not just an average Joe, that, all of that together, I think, comes to your point that he knows, but.
Oh, he absolutely knows. Yeah. Cause after that, he says, I'm practically blind without my glasses. Siren's coming. You better go.
Yeah. And there's also the added bit where, and I think this does go to connect it to the point that Barbara Gordon went with him to talk to Bruce about being a suspect, is when Bruce talks to Barbara, he says, I will not hurt your son. In her eyes, he knows that she might think he's Batman, and nobody really knows what Batman is. Is Batman the fucking boogeyman? Is Batman, what is he? And he makes it a point to say, I will never hurt your kid, So I kind of think it was almost like a moment where both Gordons end up finding out. I also, going back to Barbara Gordon, I also like the fact that Loeb and the bad cops threatened to use his affair against him. So he just is honest with his wife. And there's that one great panel where they call her on the phone and she's just like, yeah, I know about it later, and hangs up the phone. I love that. I just thought that was a great moment in the book.
Yeah, that was a good scene. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, they had a nice twist on that too, because when they drive away, he parks and tells his wife about it. But again, very well done, because it cuts away. He says, I have to tell you something. Then it cuts away and you see Bruce looking out the window and saying, why the hell are they parked there for 10 minutes? And it's also perfect because you now on the backside, you have to figure Bruce is like, oh shit, does he figure out I'm Batman?
Right. Are they talking about it right now?
Yeah. But they're talking about the affair. So that was, again, just like great storytelling and great, to your point again, Lloyd, of almost like just a beautiful movie shot of two panels, two entirely different things, and neither is spelt out, because Gordon just says, I have to talk to you, and then we leave. And then Bruce is just like, I don't know why they're sitting there for 10 minutes. And you get these great concepts from that, but never spelt out. So very, very smart.
Now, I got to ask you guys this, because I think we're all heading towards the same area with what we're going to grade this book in terms of, I think we all really liked it. I'm not going to spoil that. I think you could tell by listening. I want to ask you, because I have a certain feeling, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but if I was an editor, if they brought this to me, and I'm not an editor, so Denny O'Neil, rest in peace, you're a better man than me. But there's one facet of this book that I felt was overall wholly unnecessary, and I want to get your opinions on it. The Catwoman story, all the Selena Kyle stuff. I felt like it could have been excised from this book, and it would not have made it weaker, and it really wouldn't have made it better, but it just would have like maybe allowed for other stuff or been a little more succinct. Again, this is 4 issues. This is tight as fuck, so it doesn't have to be cut out. But I felt like in a book that has so many good characters and so much meat on the bone, that this was one bit that just didn't ring as wholly important to me. It felt tacked on to me, and it almost felt like editorial edict. Like, you got to throw Catwoman in here somehow. Lloyd, do you feel that way, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I do feel that way. I don't think it takes away from the book at all. I mean, it does provide a tiny little out. I mean, the cat in the burning building, that she sent in there. I mean, it provides that, which could have been done a number of other ways as well.
And they do make it a point to say that Gordon, because he paid for the suit he stole from the tailor, he didn't hurt the cat. Like, this makes Gordon think this is a good guy. But they could have done that without the cat too. But
they could have.
Right.
They could have.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I think it was unnecessary. And also they show Selena Kyle. So if you've read comic books, Selena Kyle's Catwoman, and there's two panels where she's instantly the Catwoman. She's like, hey, we're broke. I'm going to go. And she's like all of a sudden sliding on a glove, and she's got a Catwoman suit.
Oh, I got a new idea. That we're going to do something else. We're getting out of this gig.
Yeah, and then instantly she's Catwoman. I think I like the humor because I like the humor that she's trying to be her own thing, and then they always keep showing the cops and the
and they
media.
She was his partner.
She's like his partner or works for him or some other thing, and she's pissed off about that. I like that humor, but I agree. There was no point.
It could have worked without it for sure.
Yeah. After her first introduction, where she's looking all hot and dominatrix out, I thought, okay, she's gonna pop. I figured she wouldn't be a big part of it, but then it got to the point where every time she popped up, even if it was for 1 page or 5 panels, I felt like this is 5 panels is getting me nowhere. And in a book this tight, I can't complain, because again, this book is really does a lot with 4 issues. But I just thought that was one thing that would keep the story from being like almost perfect to me, is the inclusion of the Selena Kyle stuff. I just didn't get it.
Yeah, at the end she did fight them, and they like Mike said, oh, she must be working for Batman, and then she said, now they think I'm working for him. and then nothing. You get nothing after that at all.
Right. And you didn't get like, obviously Batman and Catwoman, they almost got married 2 years ago. The book is coming. By the time this episode comes out, the Batman and Catwoman book by Tom King, 12-issue miniseries will be out. So, I mean, she's obviously a huge part of the Batman mythos. She had her own fucking movie, whether it was shit or not. She was in Batman Returns, but like, they didn't solidify their connection in this at all. She shows up as an ancillary character, and then there's not even a moment where like they run into each other and there's a spark. Like that would have been a great moment, like at the end where Batman and Catwoman or Bruce and Selina have a moment, and you see an initial like spark of like attraction, and then you go, "That's where this stuff started."
She should have just scratched him. Scratch and then left.
Yeah. And nothing.
I think that was exactly to your point, John. I think that would have been the better ending. If you're going to put her in there to just name drop and to give Batman fans something, I think it would have been a better ending to have something like that as a hint to what would happen. I don't think she should have become Catwoman. Just like there's the tiniest hint of the Joker, which is great.
I like that.
At the absolute end. And it's also this just kind of throwaway because Gordon's like, I don't know who this weirdo is that calls himself the Joker.
Right.
If they had done the same thing, like you said, with Selina Kyle, like if they had met, if there had been some kind of antagonistic attraction, especially after they fought over the young prostitute or something, but there was no point. There was absolutely no point in her becoming Catwoman in that, because Batman never, like, she starts robbing places. They show her ripping up somebody's doll collection. There's no point except for the fact that she doesn't care. And Batman actually there's never a point where he tries to stop her because he's only going after Carmine and all the top corrupt people. There's no part where he's trying to stop, Catwoman from like doing burglaries, right?
Yeah.
So,
it feels like to me someone at DC said, okay, we've got the A story, which is Batman and Gordon. Maybe the B story is all of their little branches. We need like a C story. We need something that like, something sexy or something
needed.
Or something that shows like life in the city. You know what I mean? Like this is a picture of what it's like for people in Gotham. And we're going to use Selina Kyle because she's an established character, and Holly Robinson Pete, who it was on 21 Jump Street. And I don't know, it didn't work for me. So, but hey, they can't all be zingers. So I'm not complaining. All right. So let's get to the portion. Or Lloyd, is there anything else that you want to cover for Batman Year One that we haven't mentioned?
Not really, other than the movie, like I mentioned earlier.
Right.
With a Blu-ray. It's Batman Year One, and it's a near perfect adaptation of the book. Very, very slight changes. No changes that really detract from, the Frank Miller story at all. And some of it, taken right from the panels of the book. Actually, most of it taken right from the panels of the book. Really good animation. Bryan Cranston did a fantastic job as James Gordon. The only knock I would give it was, and I forgot to write the guy's name down, the actor that played Batman. They didn't really get the voice on that. I wasn't buying the Batman voice.
It's not Kevin Conroy.
No.
Okay.
No, not him.
All right.
Yeah.
It's a very, very good animated film.
Now, how's the art? Is it match? I watched it like a million
almost
years ago.
matches perfectly, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Those DC animated things, like especially those movies, are super hit or miss for me. I've seen some I really like a lot, and then I've seen ones that I'm like, what the fuck is this? But if you say it's good, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's good.
And I know Cranston did more later on. I think he did the Dark Knight Returns as well. I don't know if he was Gordon in that or if he was Batman in that, but I'm pretty sure Cranston did a few of those.
Yeah, so the Ben McKenzie is the Batman in that one.
Okay.
Oh,
and that's the only time he's done Batman.
So here's a funny true fact about Ben McKenzie is that Ben McKenzie is the actor who and I don't watch the show, but he's the actor who plays Gordon on Gotham.
Yep.
So it kind of, yeah. He's also married to Marina Baccarin from Firefly, and Man, oh man, she's a biscuit.
Ooh.
All right, so let's go and give this thing a grade on the pintometer here. We're going to go from 0 to 5, quarter scale allowable, and factor in all your feelings, art, writing, everything to you personally, what you felt about Batman Year One, and we're going to end with Officer Mike because the law goes last. Let's start with the Manster and find out what he thought of this thing.
The Manster shall go first. Well, you convinced me to almost convinced me to change my score a little bit with your argument about Selena Kyle, because it's a very valid argument and it's true. But I'm not going to let it sway me. Okay. To me, the artwork in this graphic novel, this trade paperback, or if you will, it's inspiring. Miller tells an engaging origin story. It's just hard to do for something that you've already known. The character development for James Gordon is top notch. It contributes pretty significantly to the Batman mythos. Gives you a good introduction to other characters that'll dictate future plots of future stories. I think it's one of the most well-crafted Batman stories. Dark Knight Returns, Black Mirror, Long Halloween. And I'm going against my normal rule, 5 out of 5.
All right. You busted a 5 nut on this thing.
I busted a 5 nut.
Busted the 5 nut. So this thing is, for a 4-issue story, pretty close to perfect, but I do have to subtract due to the Selena Kyle stuff. I think that knocked off, it just shaved off a bit. I don't know if I was going to go perfect totally, so I'm going to go a little bit less than the Manster, and I'm going to go with a 4.5, 450 for Ganache, which brings us to, as we called him, the Silver Fox. He's the officer of Planet Comics, Officer Mike. We're going to find out what he thinks.
So I'm gonna go even lower because I agree. I agree with the Selena Kyle unnecessary. I liked the handling of Gordon. I felt they could have done a little bit more with Bruce Wayne growing. So like if you had hacked out the Selena Kyle and you gave her panels to more growth of Bruce becoming Batman, I could have done that. One of the things I noted is, and it's been done now, but at the time, he isn't perfect, but also he goes from bat through the window to almost like a perfect bat suit. So, and he had, like, if you remember, like when he's getting chased, not only does he have a perfect bat suit, but he had a bat belt with like explosives and all kinds of other things.
Oh yeah, with a thermite
charges.
But to your point, that's where I think he doesn't have a perfect bat suit. I think it's the first version, because as soon as the fire breaks out, his bat belt explodes, and he makes it a point to say like it wasn't protected well enough. So I think he's getting there. He's got.
I just think, again, if you take out the Kyle panels and do a little bit more of him getting there, I would have done it. So long story short, love the art. I like Frank Miller's writing, but also for our next episode, I think Frank Miller's done better. I think we see the seeds here. Like one of the things I didn't mention that he uses a lot is there's a lot of those little panels of people on TV talking, and that's the kind of classic Frank Miller does that all the time, like a TV newscast or something like that. So I'm going to go 3.75.
All right.
And not to be hard on this, I'm almost a 4, but I think I think some of the stuff goes better. But I think I've seen Red Miller do Batman better. I also just think, and maybe it was a limitation. Although, to your point, John, you said that he could have made it as long as he wanted. So maybe it was a limitation of being 4 regular comics and not a whole graphic novel. But I think he could have done better. I liked it. I liked the hell out of it, but I think he could have even expanded and done more.
All right, so 375 from Officer Mike. I give it a 4.5, and then the Manster busts the 5 nut.
Busted out a 5.
All over Batman Year One. Let's go to our Twitter friends, and I'll read off what some of them thought about this. And I got a lot of responses, so I'll go through several of them. Our buddy Lou from the show, Lou from Pina Comics. Amazing story. And while Dark Knight gets much of the credit for creating the template for the modern Batman, Year One really fleshes out the character. Stu, our buddy Stu from SWO Productions, very succinct, better than Dark Knight Returns, which Mike doesn't agree with, but he also says not as good as Long Halloween. So Wizard, this is probably Joey from So Wizard. I think he does all of their social media. It's a classic. It's required Batman reading. I definitely prefer it over Dark Knight Returns. So these people are all shitting all over Mike's theory. Mondo Creepy TV, Matt Maisto. I still have my original issues. It's cool to shit on Frank Miller these days, which is true, but it still holds up, and it partially laid the foundation for transformation of the industry that, for better or worse, catered to mature readers, required reading. And that is true. That even though this was in the original Batman book, there is a guy who's getting a dildo shoved up his ass by the Catwoman off panel. So,
yeah.
Lonnie Chant, who does the Pina Comics superhero logo, at Lotomatic on Twitter, and a good old friend of mine. It's very simply my favorite Batman story. And our buddy Adam Walenta, the co-creator of Punk Taco. I love Year One. The art alone is amazing, and I've studied it over and over. One of my all-time favorites. I also love when they did Daredevil. Love Dark Knight as well. Ocho Duro Parlay Hour, another great podcast. The capitals, classic Batman story. Few come even close, and it's better than The Dark Knight Returns. Michael Butler, who did the Batman Forever.
My rating is being vindicated.
You're 5 nut. I'll do 2 more real quick. Michael Butler from Forgotten Cinema, who just did the Batman Forever episode, and spoiler alert, even if that episode hasn't come out yet, he loved it, so that might sway his opinion. Year One is essential Batman reading. Many books have done a great job at a deeper appreciation for Gotham or the Rogues Gallery, but few have really helped to elevate Batman / Bruce and Gordon to the heights that this book does. And I will read one last one off from Harold Sipe. He is a friend and a game creator, and he's actually a comic writer. He's got some published comics out there. It's the one I would hand. I like his. Might be my favorite quote. It's the one I would hand someone if I could only recommend one Batman story. This was Miller at his peak. Jim Gordon has never been written as well, although many have tried to emulate one of the best comic book stories of all time. And I think that's a pretty good way to end this. And but now super excited because we are going to come back with the same crew right here, and we're going to do a sequel episode to this. So stay tuned for the three of us talking about the 1986 original series by Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Returns. Mike, thank you so much for coming on again. You're always a pleasure to have on. Always ton of fun to talk to. It was good seeing you. I saw you a month ago or so
through glass.
Very safely. I saw you through glass. We said hi. That was a very weird night. The whole night was very odd. Just being somewhere where you couldn't really be with people, and it was unseasonably cold, and it was fun. I'm not saying it wasn't fun, but it was just it was one of the few times I've been able to go out and do something socially during COVID, and it immediately showed me that things are a little bit different right now. But it was a fun night nonetheless. Although I got to say, and I think I told Larry this already, for all the people that have been telling me for years that The Gate's a good movie, that is not a good movie. By the way, that is not a good movie.
It's not bad.
I appreciated going and seeing it. I appreciated getting out for the night, but The Gate's not that good. So, Manster, why don't you give everybody out there where they can find their Pina Comics?
Go ahead over to pinocomics.com. You can find a lot of articles and reviews. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart, etc. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click the little bell for the notifications. You get some video content and some Friday the 13th reviews. Those are fun.
Yeah.
On the social media, Facebook and Twitter, it's at Pint of Comics. On Instagram, it's at Pint_O_comics.
All right. I'll say see you to Mike. Mike, see ya.
See ya.
And Lloyd, why don't you say it to our listeners, friends, and audience?
See ya.
I'm Batman.
It's over, Johnny. It's over. Nothing is over. Nothing. You just don't turn it off!